Okay, so we are factoring. So how many terms in each of these? How many terms here? I heard some, yes, I heard a couple people say what it is. How many terms? 4 terms. Have we ever factored when there's 4 terms? No, we've never factored with 4 terms. So this, I'm going to show you a new way to factor today. It's called factoring by grouping. So when you see 4 terms, that's going to be your indication that it's going to be this type of factoring. Factoring by grouping. We're going to group the first 2. So I'm grouping these 2, and then I'm grouping these 2. So then I'm going to take the greatest common factor out of each one. What's the greatest common factor on the first one? That requires some thinking. 3a squared. So it's 3a squared times what? 3 times what is 18? 6. And a times what is a to the 3rd? Oh, sorry, it's not 3a. Is it 3a or 3a squared? 3a squared, because we've got an a squared here. Does that make sense? We need to take out the greatest common factors. We're going to take out a 3a squared. So this would be 6a. So we're just factoring. So now what's the 3a squared times what gives us 3a squared? Yes, so this would be plus 1. What's the greatest common factor here? So plus 4. And then what's left? 6a plus 1. Oh my gosh. Look at that. It's the same. So now we're going to do what we did in the warm-up, and we're going to factor it completely. So what's in common? 6a plus 1. What's not in common is the 3a squared and the 4. So in the second parentheses, what goes in the second parentheses? 3a squared plus 4. Questions on that? So it's just a step further from what we did in that warm-up. Okay, so again, we're going to group. There's 4 terms. We're going to group the first 2 and the last 2. Let me move this. See if I can. And then we're going to group the second 2. What's the greatest common factor on the first 2? 8n squared. And then what goes inside? Alina, tell us what goes inside the parentheses. Plus or minus? Eight times what is 40? Yeah, feel free to use a calculator. You want to 5. So it's just 5. And then what's the greatest common factor in the second 2? Freddie, tell us what's the greatest common factor in the second group. Frankie, I'm sorry. Sorry, yeah, I said the wrong name.
Frankie.
Sorry, honey. Please, I need you to stop. 5, good. And then what would you have next? Hold on a second. Do I need to double the homework assignment today? Okay. I need you to sit quietly, please. That's my one and only warning. So 4n and then minus 5. So now my final answer, 4n minus 5, because we have that twice, and 8n squared plus 5. Okay, so we'll group again. This time, since this is a minus, I'm putting the parentheses in front of that minus. What's my greatest common factor in the first two? 7 n squared. 2n minus 7. What's my greatest common factor here? Okay, so I'm going to try it with a 4 and see what happens when we do a 4. We do 4, then we get a negative 2n and we get plus 7. It's not the same, is it? So we need it to be a negative 4 on this one. So we want those to be the same, so we're going to change this to a negative 4. And then that becomes negative 7. Does that make sense? So then my answer, 2n minus 7. And 7n squared minus 4. Okay, number 4. What's your greatest common factor on the first group? X. And so this is going to be 7z plus 3h. And then what's the greatest common factor in the second one? No. So there's going to be a y, and is there a number? Yeah, so negative 3y. And then that would be 7z plus 3h. So those are the same. So 7z plus 3h times x minus 3y. Go ahead and do the U-try, please. So you're looking at, you put parentheses around the first two, and then parentheses around the second. What's the common?
These two are
So first, where do we take that first? There's a b involved. And this one has a b squared. So we're going to take a b squared. And what number do we want?
3, 7. 7.
B squared. And then bracket left and right. 7 b squared times 1 gives you 21. 3. And then any more negative number?
Yeah. No.
What if it was 5x? 5x times 5x. Okay, let's see what we're back to the last example. Any questions on that before we move on to the last example? So what we're doing today this is what we're going to do the most of the rest of this unit. We're going to solve. So finding the roots is another way of saying saying solve or find the zeros. So how do we do that? Yes. So notice it's an x squared and it's a trinomial. So when we factor, how would we factor one like this? Yes. And then what goes on the top and what goes on the bottom? So we want to take the 3 times -2 or -6 on the top, and then what on the bottom? 5. So what multiplies to -6 and adds to 5?
2 times
6 and -1. So x plus 6, x minus 1. What next?
0.
Before you do that, there's something else we still have to do. We have to divide, because remember, if we multiply this out, it doesn't get us back here. It just, since we multiplied that 3 times -2, it got us to get the x to find out what these two numbers are. So we need to divide by 3, and we get x plus 2, and then slide this 3 up, 3x minus 1. And now we use the zero product property. And we get -2. Okay, number 7. How many terms? 4. How are we going to factor this one? And there's 4 terms. Yeah, what we just did, the factoring by grouping. So we're going to group the first 2 and the last 2. So what is the greatest common factor on the first 2? X squared times x minus 3. And then what's the greatest common factor on these 2? There's something bigger. 16. So we're going to take out 16, and then this would be x minus 3. And so what we have is the same again. That's what we want. So x squared minus 16 times x minus 3. And so now we can What do we do next? Zero product property. X squared minus 16 is 0. X minus 3 is 0. This one we get x is 3. What do we do on this one here? Yeah, so in order to do that, what do we have to do first? If we're going to use square roots, we've got to get that x squared by itself. So we're going to add 16. X squared is 16, and then take the square root. Got to get two answers. What are the two answers? 4 and
3, 4.
What's my other answer here?
4 and 4.
I want 3 answers total. This x squared equals 16. I need 2 answers here. 4 and -4. Really easy to forget that -1. So 4, -4, and 3 are my answers. So if you take a look at your degree, that's going to tell you how many answers you're going to have. The degree on this one is what? What's the degree on this one? I guess somebody pass this out.